Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is Pro Revenge Story. I worked at this burger joint in the heart of downtown until last month. Not the greatest job, but it paid the bills. One afternoon in July 2025, we got completely swamped. Usually this happens during game nights since we're right behind the soccer stadium, but this day was different. I was already in a bad mood because Tyler, my coworker who acted like he owned the place, showed up an hour late. This meant I had to open the entire front of the restaurant by myself in just 30 minutes while customers were already waiting outside. "Nice of you to show up," I muttered under my breath when Tyler finally walked in. I didn't say anything else to him. No point in starting drama. The real chaos started during my afternoon shift when 3 youth soccer teams arrived after their tournament. Picture this. Over 100 hungry players with a line stretching out the door. During rushes like this, our kitchen staff had to abandon their stations to help us front-of-house workers. We were juggling everything, taking orders, bussing tables, assembling orders, running food, serving drinks, and making milkshakes. "This is the best burger I've ever had," one of the young players called out. "Thank you so much for being so quick despite the crowd," another parent said while leaving a generous tip. The soccer crowd was surprisingly patient and friendly. No complaints, just genuine appreciation and good tips. It was actually turning into a decent day until she showed up. Let me explain. We handle DoorDash orders too. That's when this particular nightmare began. This woman walks in. Picture the stereotypical Karen haircut and the most unsettling eyes you've ever seen. They were this artificial bright blue color, like someone had photoshopped them in real life. She was here for a DoorDash order I'd confirmed earlier, but hadn't made the milkshake for yet, because who knows when drivers will actually show up. "How much longer?" she demanded, tapping her designer watch. "Just finishing up the milkshake now, ma'am." "Should only be a minute," I replied, trying to keep things professional. "A minute? I've been standing here for 5 already," she snapped, her voice rising. "Do you know how much money I'm losing?" She started berating my coworkers while I was making her milkshake. The woman was dressed head to toe in expensive athleisure wear, but apparently a few dollars in tips was worth causing this scene. "This is absolutely ridiculous," she shouted across the counter. "How hard is it to make one simple milkshake? I want to speak to your manager right now." Marcus, our shift lead, who we call M, came out to handle the situation. "Ma'am, I'm the manager on duty. We're extremely busy, and—" "You're the manager?" she interrupted, looking him up and down. "What kind of manager lets their staff treat delivery drivers like this? You're nothing but a coward." "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," M said firmly. "Coward, coward," she kept screaming as she finally stormed out, leaving everyone in the restaurant staring. After she left, I did some investigative work. The DoorDash tablet keeps records of drivers, and I remembered the customer's name, found her contact information, and reported the incident to DoorDash, complete with her name and number. They followed up later to say they'd handled the situation. We never saw her again, though she'd been a regular driver for our restaurant. Now whenever things get stressful, we just look at each other and whisper, "Coward." It's become our way of lightening the mood. The next one is an entitled people story. When I married my husband 8 years ago, I knew his mother was a bit difficult, but I had no idea just how bad things would get. For privacy, I'll call my mother-in-law Diane. From the moment I got pregnant with our daughter Emma, Diane started acting like she was the mother. During my pregnancy, she'd touch my belly without asking, tell me what I should and shouldn't eat, and even tried to invite herself to my doctor's appointments. My husband Jake would tell her to back off, but she'd just laugh it off and say she was just excited to be a grandma. When Emma was born 5 years ago, things got worse. Diane would show up at our house unannounced, criticize my parenting choices, and constantly try to take over. She'd say things like, "That's not how you hold a baby," or "She's crying because you're doing it wrong." I tried to be patient for Jake's sake, but it was wearing me down. Jake and I had many arguments about his mother. He agreed she was overstepping, but he'd grown up with her behavior and had a hard time setting firm boundaries. We tried family counseling, which helped a bit. We established some rules. Diane had to call before visiting, she couldn't undermine our parenting decisions, and she needed to respect our space. Things improved for a while. Diane seemed to understand the boundaries, though she'd occasionally make passive-aggressive comments. We settled into an uneasy peace where we'd see her every couple of weeks, usually for dinner at our house or hers. Then, about 6 months ago, Jake's father passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack. Diane was devastated, and we all were. Jake spent a lot of time helping her with arrangements and being there for emotional support. I fully supported this. She had lost her husband of 40 years, and she needed her son. But after the funeral, Diane's behavior changed drastically. She became obsessed with Emma, saying things like, "She's all I have left of your father, and she looks just like him." She started showing up at our house daily, bringing gifts for Emma and trying to take her for outings alone. I was uncomfortable with this, but tried to be compassionate given what she was going through. Jake and I agreed to let her see Emma regularly, but always with one of us present. This wasn't good enough for Diane, who wanted to take Emma overnight to her house. We refused, which led to huge arguments. One day, about 3 months ago, I picked Emma up from kindergarten. We went to the grocery store, and while we were checking out, I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was Diane. "Oh, I didn't know you'd be here," she said, though the way she said it made me suspect she'd followed us. "Just grabbing a few things for dinner," I replied, trying to keep things civil. "Emma, sweetie, do you want to come to Grandma's house? I made those cookies you like." Before I could intervene, Emma said, "Yes. Can I go, Mommy?" "Not today, honey. We need to get home and start dinner before Daddy gets home." Diane's face darkened. "You're always keeping her from me. She wants to come with me." "Diane, we've talked about this. We're happy for you to visit, but we need to plan ahead." She huffed and walked away. I thought that was the end of it, but as I was loading groceries into my car, I realized Emma wasn't beside me. Panic set in immediately. I looked around and spotted Diane hurrying across the parking lot with Emma in tow, heading toward her car. I dropped everything and ran after them, shouting, "Diane, stop right now!" A security guard heard the commotion and came over. By this time, I'd caught up to them. "This woman is trying to take my daughter without permission," I told him, my voice shaking. "She's my granddaughter. I'm allowed to take her," Diane shouted. The security guard asked us both to calm down and suggested we call the police to sort it out. I agreed immediately. Diane became even more agitated, still gripping Emma's hand while Emma looked confused and scared. When the police arrived about 10 minutes later, I explained the situation. The officer asked to see ID from both of us and asked Emma who I was. "That's my mommy," Emma said, looking relieved to see me. The officer tried to separate Diane from Emma, explaining that he needed to talk to us individually. That's when Diane completely lost it. She started screaming that I was keeping her granddaughter from her, that Emma belonged with her, and that I was a terrible mother. When the officer placed his hand on her arm to guide her away, she slapped him hard across the face. Everything happened very quickly after that. The officer called for backup while restraining Diane, who was now thrashing and screaming. Emma was crying, and I was trying to comfort her while staying out of the way. Within minutes, more police arrived, and Diane was handcuffed and placed in a patrol car. I gave my statement to the police, explaining the history of Diane's behavior and how it had escalated since her husband's death. They took it very seriously, especially since she had assaulted an officer. They told me they would be charging her and advised me to get a restraining order. I called Jake, who rushed to meet us at the police station. He was in shock when I explained what happened. He'd known his mother was struggling, but he never thought she would try to take Emma without permission or assault a police officer. "I'm so sorry," he kept saying. "I should have done more. I should have seen this coming." We filed for an emergency restraining order that day. Diane was held overnight and appeared before a judge the next morning. She was charged with attempted kidnapping, assault on a law enforcement officer, and resisting arrest. Jake and I hired a lawyer who specialized in family law. We were told that Diane would likely face serious consequences for her actions, especially the assault on the officer. Our lawyer also helped us file for a permanent restraining order to protect Emma and ourselves. The court proceedings were difficult. Diane hired her own lawyer who tried to paint her as a grieving widow who just wanted to spend time with her granddaughter. But the evidence was clear. She had tried to take Emma without permission and had assaulted an officer in the process. The judge granted our permanent restraining order, requiring Diane to stay at least 500 feet away from us and have no contact with Emma. For the criminal charges, she was ultimately sentenced to 2 years of probation, mandatory therapy, and community service. The judge made it clear that if she violated the restraining order or the terms of her probation, she would face jail time. Jake was torn up about the whole situation. He loved his mother but couldn't excuse her actions. We found a therapist who specialized in family trauma to help us, especially Jake, process everything that had happened. It's been 3 months since the incident. Diane has complied with the restraining order as far as we know. Jake's sister has been in contact with her and reports that she's attending therapy and seems to be coming to terms with her husband's death and her own behavior. Jake and I have discussed what might happen in the future. We both agree that if Diane shows significant improvement and takes responsibility for her actions, we might consider supervised visits someday. But that's a long way off, and our priority is Emma's safety and well-being. The hardest part has been explaining the situation to Emma. We've worked with a child psychologist to help her understand in age-appropriate ways why she can't see her grandmother right now. She still asks about Diane sometimes, and it breaks my heart to see her confused, but I know we're doing the right thing. This whole experience has taught me how important it is to set firm boundaries from the beginning. If we had been clearer and more consistent with Diane years ago, maybe things wouldn't have escalated the way they did. Jake has also learned a lot about standing up to his mother and putting our family first. I never imagined I'd be in a situation where my mother-in-law would try to kidnap my child or assault a police officer. It sounds like something from a TV drama, not real life. But it happened, and we're dealing with the aftermath as best we can. For anyone dealing with difficult in-laws, my advice is to set clear boundaries early and enforce them consistently. And if the situation becomes dangerous, don't hesitate to involve the authorities. Your children's safety comes first. Always. The restraining order gives us peace of mind, but I still check the locks twice before bed and keep a closer eye on Emma when we're out. I hope someday we can all heal from this, but for now, we're taking it one day at a time, focusing on being the best parents we can be for our daughter. The next one is a malicious compliance story. This happened about 8 years ago when I was still working for a North American Class 1 railroad. I worked in IT, specifically in a department whose primary role was to generate metrics and regulatory reporting for the Surface Transportation Board and their ilk. Most of our measures were inward-facing, though, covering such things as volume, dwell, revenue, and productivity. This story involves a problematic dashboard in the last category, specifically a measure of the productivity of our unionized office workers. The managers loved it because it gave them a weekly graph of who needed corrective punishment for underperforming. Our toxic CEO of the day was all about punishment. They even had quotas to meet. It was in regards to this last one that, I'll call him B, made the short walk across to our building so that he could ask me about the metric. He'd just come from an uncomfortable meeting with his direct manager who showed him how he was the lowest performing employee on their graph, by a wide margin. His manager told him to pick up the pace or he'd face potential repercussions, possibly even a 1-week suspension. B came to me because he knew I had access to the back end of the metrics and he wanted to know what they were measuring him on because he was never not busy. Some important background on B is that he was a very senior, conscientious employee. He had as much experience as the rest of his group combined, and he came to me because we went back about 20 years from my time in the union before I moved to IT. The job of their group was to work the queue, that is, go into the failure queue of events that had cacked for one reason or another, resolve the issue, and allow the automated functions to flow properly. A couple of trivial examples would be a train lift failing because the cars had not been properly reported into the customer's track, or conversely they'd been reported in, but the customer had not electronically released them out yet. Because he had so much experience, B took it upon himself to hand-pick the really messy, time-consuming ones from the queue, ones where somebody had backdated events, and it took some faffing about to figure out what was wrong and what needed to be fixed. Or where a conductor took all the paperwork home and forgot to update this tablet with the switching that he'd done. Basically, if it was something that might require phone calls and deep research, he would deal with it rather than let inexperienced folks struggle with it. I pulled up a pre-production version of the dashboard and scrolled through the source code to find the important bits. We discovered that it was looking for clusters of specific event types reported under an employee's user ID with at least a 2-minute gap between the clusters. He was puzzled over the last requirement, but I explained that it was so that a single train being processed would only count as one event. It might take a few minutes to fix the train, but the reporting was at the car level, and as long as no more than 2 minutes elapsed between the report on one car and the next, it would all count as a single incident to the dashboard. So, it doesn't look at how many records you handle, only that they happen more than 2 minutes apart? He paused for a moment before adding, "That's really dumb. They don't care about complexity. They're seriously just counting how many times a person clicks OK. Somebody could game that pretty easily if they wanted." He walked away without saying anything else, but I could see the mental gears turning. He came back to me a couple of weeks later to give me the good news. He'd gone from being the most underperforming person in his group to being their top employee by just as big a margin. "It's great," he told me. "Forget all the complicated crap. I'm just grabbing the biggest trains from the queue. I work one screen of cars, then sit back and drink my coffee for exactly 3 minutes before I process the next. I finally have time to complete the crossword puzzle in my paper." Sadly, the company attributed his miraculous turnaround to their draconian discipline practices and never clued in that while their numbers went up, their actual productivity had tanked a bit. The only real consequence to him was that his job became a lot easier, and he got to slide into retirement on a high note. The next one is an entitled people story. Sorry for how long this ended up being. It's been a decade, and it's the first time I ever wrote this down. I guess I'm still angry and needed to vent. Seeing a few stories on here made me think about when my dad died and everything leading up and after it, trying to hide some of the identifiable details in case someone I know comes across this, but just in case a specific person does, I just want you to know I haven't forgotten and I will not forgive. I'm the accident child. Dad had kids from a previous marriage and didn't want any more, and my mom was never supposed to get pregnant due to having tumors removed from her ovaries. But as the 80s slowly bleed into the 90s, I came along. Thankfully, my parents never treated me with contempt like many accident babies are treated, but my sister sure did. Over a decade older than me, she never liked me. She put on a decent facade, but everyone knew she didn't care for me. The only time I can remember her being truly nice to me was when my grandfather died and the one time she drove me to the airport. She damn near hated my mom. She had it stuck in her mind that my mother broke up her parents' marriage, even though our dad didn't meet my mother until years after the divorce. Hell, my dad's ex-wife and my mom became and still are really good friends, so no one ever understood where that idea came from. In the early 2010s, my dad got sick. The kind of sick where everything happened at once. He ended up in a coma for a month and wasn't expected to make it. Somehow, he pulled through but became permanently disabled and was forced into retirement. After being in the hospital and rehab for a few months, he came home. Since the government stops caring about you when you are no longer able to make them money and can only take money from them, I moved back in with my parents to help out. For 2 years, I worked full-time, went to school full-time, and assisted my dad. Mom and I would take turns taking care of him during the week, and every weekend I would watch him for 8 to 10 hours while Mom went to work. All their money had gone to his bills, and if it wasn't for the fact that their house was paid off, they would have lost it. So Mom and I were the bill payers while Dad rested in his chair, doped up on meds, watching reruns of TV shows he had seen countless times before. I'm going to spare some of the details, but most of my time with my dad was helping go to the bathroom and clean him up, help him shower and clean him after he didn't make it to the bathroom or when he vomited on himself due to the cocktail of medicine he was on. When I was in my late 20s, most people thought I was 40 from all the stress. I'm almost 40 now, and I look younger and better than I did 10 years ago. My sister, however, would visit maybe 2-3 times a year and clip his toenails. He liked how she did it. She never once wiped his ass, or cleaned up vomit, never saw the bad side of him. She knew the situation we were all in and still skirted around asking him for money, something she had done several times a year before he was sick. Then, he died. It happened fast. One Friday, he started acting really weird, so we took him to the hospital where we discovered he had a minor heart attack. But due to his poor health, it started shutting his organs down. The following Monday morning, I said goodbye to my dad as I watched him take his last breaths. I'll give my sister credit, she was somewhat kind during this time. It wasn't to last. We held a small memorial service at the house. My brothers had flown in before to help set us up. Dad didn't have a will, but we knew what he would have given us as he told us before. It wasn't much since Mom was still alive, but we divided up his possessions amongst us peacefully, setting aside things for our sister. When she arrived, she immediately began walking through the house, claiming dibs on everything and becoming mad when she wanted something that was already promised to us. For example, his gun collection was to be split between one of my brothers and I as we served in the military and were the only ones with any interest in guns. But she was upset she didn't get one. She even tried claiming things that belonged to my mother that we put a stop to. The day of the memorial went smooth, until the night. I had been drinking for over a day at that point, just dealing with all the stress of the past 2 years and also having been laid off my job the same day he died. Duck you to my old boss for that one. At one point we were going to take a shot in his memory and she wanted in. We told her okay, we're pouring them now, and she disappeared. We waited a few minutes but had no clue where she went to, so myself and the 10+ other family members took them. She suddenly appears and starts throwing a fit that we didn't come get her. Apparently she had gone outside to smoke, but myself and another family member had checked but couldn't find her. She left and drove back home after. A couple of months go by and my mom finds out that she needs all children's signatures to take full possession of his truck since my mom and him were on the title and he didn't have a will. Something about us not contesting her ownership of it. Myself and my brothers signed it without hesitation, but she made a fuss about it. I found out later it was because she believed it should have gone to her instead of my mom. I ended up moving in with my brother across the country to start over. A few months later, my mom decided to follow as she had no family back home anymore, except for her stepdaughter, who she didn't feel would care if she lived or died, so she sells the house. Remember how my dad didn't have a will? Well, that didn't matter on the house because it was parents' house she inherited when they died. My dad was never on the deed. As far as the state was concerned, the house belonged only to my mom and then me if something happened to her. That didn't stop my sister from making a big deal out of it. Now, I'm a little fuzzy on this part because I wasn't there, but apparently my sister wanted to seek legal action to force my mom, her stepmother, into selling her the house for well below market price. My sister's mother apparently put a stop to that. She apparently told her if anyone deserved the house after my mom, it was me. My sister apparently scoffed at the idea that my grandparents' house would have been my right instead of hers. So my mom sells the house and moves to the same area as me. A couple of months later, my mom is very upset. It's close to the 1-year anniversary of my dad's passing, and my sister had wrote her a nasty letter. In there, she scolded my mom for not giving, that's right, giving, not selling, her the house as it was her father's home, and my mom never had the right to sell it to anyone and should have given it to my sister for free. Somehow, even though the house belonged to my maternal grandparents, not related to her, she still fully believed the house was hers when my mom decided to sell, and it should have been given to her. That was the day I decided to cut off my sister for good. It's been almost 10 years now, and I haven't spoken to her once. Neither have my brothers, except for when one got cancer, and she tried talking to him, in my opinion to weasel into receiving something if he died, but he's been in remission for years now, and as far as I know, she no longer contacts him. In that time, I've gotten married and had 2 beautiful daughters. Never heard from my sister once during any of this. My mom lives with us now. She's in her 70s but looks 50 and gets to see her granddaughters every day. She has many friends and an active life. I haven't seen her this happy in years. I'm sure my sister would hate to know this. As for me, I don't plan on ever talking to her again. I told my wife the only way she'll ever meet her is during a funeral, and even then she probably won't talk to me because she always considered me the accident who took her dad from her. Even though she's been married twice, she still doesn't understand how families and custody works after divorce. If I die before her, though, she'll be glad to know I'm leaving something for her. It'll be a nice epoxy display with my 2 middle fingers and an ass cheek, just for her. Anyway, thank you for watching.